Okay, let's talk about spending. Remember, the Federal Reserve was giving power over the money supply, which to me means the economy, period. And the most important part of the economy is consumer spending. Okay, supply and demand are the forces that drive the U.S. economy. Supply includes labor, represented by employment, natural resources, oil, land, and water. Oil prices drive up the cost of gas. That's why I'm always wondering how much a barrel of oil is going to cost me daily, because that's what's going to determine the cost of my gas daily. Now let's go back to demand. Demand is basically personal consumption, and that drives nearly 70% of the economy. A lot of this occurs during the holiday shopping seasons, which normally starts on Black Friday. So let's talk about inflation. Inflation happens when demand is greater than supply and the prices go up. Once inflation goes up, it's hard to bring it back down, because people are expecting higher prices because they're making money off of it. So if you're taking it back down, you're not making as much money you were before. And another cause of inflation is an increase in money supply, which is controlled by the Federal Reserve. The U.S. government measures inflation by the Consumer Price Index. But the Federal Reserve measures it by core inflation, which is the price change of goods and services minus food and energy. So it is driven by, I would say, what the Federal Reserve infiltrates into the system as far as increasing money, decreasing money, based on what they feel, which I'm not sure why Federal Reserve is still allowed to do this based on the Constitution and that Coinage Act that's still in effect. Anyway, fiscal policy is the government spending and taxation that influence the economy. So let's talk about spending. Now, the U.S. Treasury divides federal spending into three groups. There's mandatory, discretionary, and interest on debt. Now, interest on debt, which is much smaller amount than the other two categories, is the interest the government pays on accumulated debt minus interest income received by the government for assets it owns. Then you have discretionary spending, is the portion of the budget that the president requests and Congress appropriates every year. It represents 1/3 of the total federal budget. So basically, the president starts the budgeting process, but Congress has government spending authority. So they have to approve what the president comes up with. Then you have mandatory spending. It's spent based on existing laws rather than the budgeting process. So that's why it's so important of the discretionary spending, because that's the only thing you can really control.